Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale with my friend Electrify. He's joining me today to share his deck that he's absolutely been killing it with. He just went 12-0 in a grand challenge, and he's kind enough not only to share the replays, but also to share his thoughts about the deck and his thoughts about the Dart Goblin. Let's take a brief second and admire his very impressive profile, and it just keeps getting more and more impressive as the days go on. I remember the first time I had him on, I think he only had 100k challenge cards won, so he's been doing some serious work. This guy's an absolute animal. He's also starting a YouTube channel where he's going to have his first upload in just a day or two, and it's going to be a graveyard Dart Goblin deck. I'll include his link to his YouTube channel in the description below. Go ahead and give him a sub, guys. He's definitely going to be a very good content creator if he sticks with it, which I'd have no reason to think he wouldn't. So we're going to go ahead and copy the deck, that way I can kind of explain it to you guys. And for the most part, it's really a standard HOG cycle deck. You have the cannon as your only structure in the deck. You have your 2 direct damage spells in the Fireball and the Zap. Other than that, just cycle cards, a lot of defensive versatility here. You, of course, do have the Gatling Goblin, aka the Dart Goblin, but this guy just feels like a total machine gun when you have him out there. Have you guys given him a shot yet? Have you tried him? I haven't leveled mine up yet, but I have played him quite a bit on the developer build. In fact, I was just on Woody's stream last night playing against him on the developer build, having a lot of fun there, and you know what? He's a powerful card. I think he's coming out the gate hot, guys, meaning that I think he does have a lot of use and a lot of utility, and you guys know who have been watching me for a while now know that I am not one to hold back my criticism on new cards. I thought Clone was going to be a bust. I thought Elite Barbarians were going to be a huge bust before they got the nerf. Remember that when Elite Barbarians first hit the scene, they were kind of subpar, they were a little lackluster, not really many people used them, and then they received that huge buff and now everybody uses them. So that's probably a good place to start. How to deal with Elite Barbarians. Of course, they're not in our deck today, but you need to know how to deal with them no matter what deck you're playing. So in this deck, you have a lot of tools in your arsenal to deal with Elite Barbarians. The first thing you want to do, of course, is kite them towards the top, towards the river, and then you can use your cannon as kind of that defensive stalwart in front of your king tower, and then you can kind of kite them this way and that, relying on your crown towers and your cannon to do basically 3-prong damage while they're running around with their heads cut off. Of course, you can also use the Dart Goblin. The Dart Goblin is incredibly versatile defensively and offensively. He's so fast moving that it can be tough for opponents to react to him in time before the damage is already done. He gets those shots off so fast. We're not used to a troop like him in the game. And speaking of new troops and new troops with new utilities, the Executioner is going to be the next troop introduced to the game in a couple weeks. I think I might do a video telling you guys everything I know about the Executioner coming soon, maybe even tomorrow, if you guys want a video like that. So the thing is, I can play these new cards till the sun comes up, right? But the problem is I can't share the gameplay yet with you guys. But I thought to myself, hey, maybe I can just, see what works, see what doesn't work, and then just have a vast knowledge about the card and try to share some of that stuff with you guys beforehand, kind of getting you guys set up for the card when it's released, so not everything's a huge surprise and trial and error. So let me know if you think that's a good idea. At the same time, I don't want to put out a video that's, okay, all about the Executioner, and then there's only like 5 seconds of actual Executioner footage that I'm actually able to share with you guys. So to be honest, I'm a little torn, but I really appreciate your feedback on that one. But back to this deck here, it is a fast deck, and I love fast decks. You guys already know that I really prefer cheap decks under 3 elixir. I think that they're good. They're good to play because it keeps you tapping. It keeps you playing cards really often, and the more repetition you get in a deck like this, the better you become at it. And I can't stress that enough, guys. If you want to play an expensive tank deck, that's totally totally fine and well, but you're making less decisions in the match because you're playing less cards overall, and the magnitude of each of those decisions is a little bit heavier. But in a cheaper deck, you're making way more decisions throughout the course of a match, but the upside is that if you make a little mistake, it's easier to correct from that mistake. So that's really how I feel about expensive decks versus cheap decks. Now, really good players are probably really good at both archetypes, whether it be very expensive or very cheap. Me personally, I just find I do better with cheap decks, and I'm talking really cheap. When I say expensive in this conversation, I mean anything over like 3.6-ish. So I'm not talking like crazy 5 elixir cost decks. I'm talking just a little bit on the more expensive range of the average elixir in the meta. But anyway, guys, let's get back to this deck and some of the tips that Electrify shared with me to help you guys have success with it if you use it. So let's start with the Gatling Goblin, the Dart Goblin. He's a beast, and I know a lot of you probably haven't leveled him up yet. So if you haven't leveled him up yet and you want a substitution, well, the natural sub here isn't the Princess, but rather the Musketeer. Especially in the current meta, you need something that's going to do some heavy point damage to air troops. Now, even though the Musketeer does a heck of a lot more damage than the Dart Goblin per shot, you do have to remember that he fires so quickly that he's still doing a decent amount of damage. Think of him, if any of you played Clash of Clans or still do, think of him like an Expo. The Expo has a relatively low DPS, but think about it, the Expo does a lot more damage because even though the DPS might be pretty low, it actually has the opportunity to kill more targets within that second because of its fire rate. So that, on top of the fact that he actually does a decent amount of damage per hit, makes him an ideal combination card with the Hog Rider. You can use Dart Goblin A on defense first and then play the Hog Rider to kind of tank for him, or B, you can play the Dart Goblin first, especially if there's a distracting or annoying interference card down on the arena. Probably going to be like a Tombstone or even a Furnace, to be honest with you guys. He's a great natural counter to the Furnace and the Tombstone. It's funny because sometimes some cards that are dominant in the meta, some people complaining about them a little bit, have a natural counter when a new card is introduced that just does very well against that sort of card. And that's certainly been the case here with Dart Goblin versus the Furnace and the Tombstone. So one more thing that Electrify really stressed a lot is that just playing for a relatively low cost of 7 elixir with the Hog Rider and the Dart Goblin, just those two cards, they can be a lethal amount of damage and take down a tower all by themselves. So think about it. Some people rush with Elite Barbarians right at the river. If you rush with Hog Rider, Dart Goblin, the opponent is going to be in a tough position. They have to react to the Hog Rider. It's a very fast-moving unit. So they often react, and they're used to reacting to the Hog Rider first, but while they're placing that cannon or the whatever they counter with, the minions, whatever it may be, you're going to have that Dart Goblin hopefully hammering away at that tower. And this is really important, guys, both on offense and defense. A Dart Goblin, even with an ice tank in front of him, is absolutely lethal when he locks onto a tower. So that makes sense defensively too. If you're defending against a Dart Goblin, guys, you cannot let him lock onto your tower. If he has an Ice Golem in front of him, if he has a Hog Rider in front of him, you have to distract him quick. It's a good time to hold your Ice Golem and play him before the Dart Goblin locks onto your tower. I really can't stress that enough, and Electrify was sure to stress that with me as well. You have to be very careful if your opponent is playing a Dart Goblin. I think we might be seeing a little bit more log play in the game. You know, the log is an interesting card because it was actually really popular when the Princess was really popular, and then the meta shifted. Princess not as popular anymore. The log still remains popular, but I think it might increase in popularity, replacing Zap in a lot of situations where players are kind of choosing either or right now, or maybe some players will just run with Zap and log in their decks. So just be careful of log, and if you have log, make sure you use it against Dart Goblin. So offensively, just to recap, guys, your ideal offensive combination win condition is going to be your Hog Rider comboed with either Ice Spirit or Ice Golem, followed by the Dart Goblin, or if you use Dart Goblin defensively, you're going to use him and then play the Hog Rider right in front as a glass tank for that Dart Goblin, and it's going to do a lot of damage. So here on this third replay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and show you Electrify versus a Lava Loon deck, and Lava Loon is starting to creep up everywhere lately. It's really dominant in the game. Lava Hound decks are actually more popular than they've ever been, especially in mid-level arenas and under tournament level standards. Of course, if you're talking Legendary Arena, not super popular unless you're in the top 200 or you have a maxed out Lava Hound, basically because you need a level 5 Lava Hound to withstand a maxed out Zap spell with your pups. A level 4 Lava Hound, believe it or not, the pups will all die to a max Zap spell, so that's why you don't see many people in the leaderboard who aren't maxed using Lava Loon decks, but they are very powerful. So it's just one example of how you can't always look at TV Royale to get good popular decks, because level of cards do actually matter a real lot, more so than just being powerful, but because of their relationship with those direct damage spells, such as the Lava Hound and the Zap, which we just discussed. So against any tanky beatdown deck, you're really going to have the same defensive philosophy, whether it's a Lava Hound deck or a Golem deck, or really any beatdown deck, a giant deck. You're going to be leaning heavily on your cannon and your Dart Goblin. You're going to want to use your Dart Goblin in the opposite lane, just like Electrify just did. Granted, that push was a little bit too strong. He was able to exchange towers, and now he has the decided advantage, being that the right tower is low on HP. So you use the Dart Goblin in the opposite lane, that range really being a huge factor here defensively in your favor, and then you're going to use your cannon to pull the balloon away from the Lava Hound, allow that Dart Goblin to snipe it, and then the Dart Goblin surprisingly does a lot of damage to the Lava Hound. You actually saw earlier in this replay how quickly he destroyed a Lava Hound all on his own. So Dart Goblin, very, very good in that respect as well, taking down those tanks. So distract the tank with the cannon, send in the Dart Goblin, and of course you have the Mega Minion as well, which you can use on the other side of your tower. So that's going to do it for this deck, guys. I hope you really have a lot of success with it and enjoy it. Thanks so much for Electrify for sharing the replays and the strategy, advice, and tips for this deck. Guys, thanks so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.